the Australians and the New Zealanders are going to get a bit upset because I'm dealing mainly with sort of with you guys up north of us. So better get over there, chat to some of the Canadians as well. And
Yeah,
and
definitely.
we've got World Masters on at the same time, which is
Yes.
absolutely brilliant. So we're live streaming onto two platforms simultaneously, one to
Mm.
the Emmet Media channel and then one to Emmet Media Extra. So I'll share those details with you as well if you want to share them with your athletes. And
Oh, yes, please.
so,
Thank you.
with absolute pleasure. So, Tom Morgan, welcome to Coffee and Conversations with Champions. Have you got coffee?
I do have coffee.
Oh, crikey, you're all right. I've got cup size envy now. Look at that. Hold that up again. Hello, Tom.
Let's go on
Yeah,
then. Here
yeah,
we go.
okay, you win. So, Tom, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you fit into powerlifting, and a little bit about your background, please?
Yeah, so my name's Tom Morgan. I'm a powerlifting athlete and coach. I've been involved in the sport for around about 7 years now. Actually, came from a background in endurance sports and road racing, but I think one thing came to the other. Kind of got away with training and sort of needed an outlet for sport. And a friend of mine essentially said, "Well, you got strong legs, so why don't you try powerlifting?" So I was like, "Okay, fair enough."
Yeah,
Did my first competition in Dave's gym in Cardiff, which is a small gym in Roth, and kind of caught the bug. I think is probably
right.
the best way to explain it. And went from there. Actually had the honour of representing Wales in my first year in powerlifting at the Commonwealth Championships in 2017, which were held in Potchefstroom in South Africa.
Yeah, okay.
That was
Yeah,
that was the first time I competed in South Africa. Not the first time I visited. I've been lucky enough to visit previously, but yeah,
right.
that kind of just went from there. And I think with my background in coaching, it kind of led to coming in hand to hand with the sport itself. So I started taking on more powerlifting athletes, sort of being exposed to sport. That then eventually led to more competition-based coaching, and then also led to then the role I am in today, which is head coach for Team Wales. Funnily enough, it's also somewhat started to seep into my academic work. So I'm also currently conducting my PhD in strength conditioning, which is focusing
Brilliant.
on powerlifting itself, which is amazing. I did think when I proposed the subject to my supervisors, they'd kind of laugh it off, but given the sheer research in the area, they were actually very excited. So that'll be a good 3 5 years more work, but very excited to get cracking with that as well.
That's absolutely brilliant. And it's wonderful to hear that you're sort of going in depth in this and also focusing on the powerlifting because, you mentioned Commonwealth and I was in Potch in 2017. So you're also going to love Sun City. There's a lot more to do.
Yes.
But Potchefstroom is a great example of sort of like South Africa's small town. It's
Mhm.
wonderful. There's also a restaurant there called Corporasi. I don't know if you had a chance to get out to it, but think of it as a 1 kilo T-bone steak for I think it's 100 rand. So that works out at about £5.
Is that the one by the hotel by any chance?
No, it's quite a distance from the hotel.
Oh,
So
okay, never mind. Yeah, there was
yeah,
one near the hotel that had similar, some ridiculous sized sirloin steak for
yes,
yeah, like £8.50.
yeah, there we. So I think, although, yeah, I mean, if what with you guys stayed, so you didn't stay at the venue hotel. You stayed sort of at the hotel with a golf course in that.
Yeah, so I think it was a sense of the venue hotel booked out quite quickly.
Yeah.
So the ones that were in a little bit later, because I think we had quite a small team. We only had 5 athletes from Wales compete that year,
Okay.
so we submitted a little later, and ended up being put up in the hotel on the outside near the
Okay.
golf
So
course,
I think
which
then you are thinking of the same place. That's probably about a 10-minute walk from that
yeah,
hotel. So yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting. Powerlifting conversation, and it immediately goes to steak. So.
oh, 100%. It's the way it goes.
So you mentioned 2017. The team was, you said five. How many are you
Yes.
bringing out this year?
So we've gone. If I give a little bit of
Yep.
history on here. So we've 5 in 2017. 2019 we took 18. 2022 we took 28. We're now taking 45 lifters. So it's growing at such an incredibly exponential rate within
I,
Wales.
I have to do this. Hold on 1 second. That's absolutely phenomenal. Hey?
Yeah, it's incredible to see. I think what I'll probably end up speaking about this a little bit later on as well, but
Mm,
I think the main barrier for us is cost, which tends to be why we have such a small team. We are obviously a much smaller nation as well. If you look at
mm.
the likes of England and their membership versus Wales, and we have around about 300, they have a few thousand.
Yes.
So they do tend to bring bigger teams, but it's also good to see, shout out to the other Celtic nations, Northern Ireland and Scotland, are also bringing relatively large teams. I think Scotland's above 60 lifters this time. I'll
Okay,
have double
brilliant.
check that, but yeah, it's great to see the smaller nations being so well represented, and kind of breaking down those kind of barriers to competitions to enable athletes to go.
Absolutely. So I think let's chat a little bit about you first, and then we'll get on to the team and the coaching stuff. So,
Yeah, perfect.
what does powerlifting mean to you?
I think for me, I've always struggled with team sports in a sense that the way my mind works, that if I've given 100% and I don't, I fall short of the mark, that's fine.
Yeah.
If I've given 100% but someone else hasn't and we fall short of the mark, I kind of get quite frustrated.
Yeah.
So being able to be in a sport where it is solely down to your performance and how you do as to what the outcome is, that kind of level of control
Yes.
kind of did appeal to me. I think the other side of it, which I know a lot of powerlifters do speak about, is you'll find that within the sport, like a lot of people have either come from or struggle with
Mm,
issues outside the sport, be that mental health, be that anything else, and it is such a great outlet because of the community. Like it is, like I said,
yes.
like an individual sport, but you still have all those other lifters, those teammates working around you. And I think it's one of the things I probably didn't expect quite as much going into sport is just the amount of support that you actually get, even though it is individual. Everyone wanting to see you do your best and sort of vice versa, like the atmosphere and like the communities and the gyms, even without powerlifting clubs. Like you find you just go in, you train, there's a few powerlifters there, you end up chatting regardless, even if you don't know them. Sometimes for
Yes.
maybe a bit longer than you intend, and you end up being there for 3 hours because you're just yapping away. But I think it's part of it, and that sort of community, those like the friendships that you make around the way. And I think that's what the international events I think mean so much to so many. Is that I mean I've met some incredible people from around the world and almost created lifelong friendships with people that you would never have met outside of it. So I think yeah, a bit maybe a bit of a vague answer there, but
No,
yeah,
I think
that
it's
kind of
spot on.
individual but team element at the same time, it means a great deal. And also, I think probably a hat tip just to the inclusivity of the sport. Like it's one of the few sports that I've either competed or worked in that really, you can be anybody from anywhere, and like not in like a bad way, but nobody cares what your
Yeah.
background is. No one cares what your beliefs are. Like all they want to do is see you lift heavy weight, and in that sense, that you can really be who you truly are and sort of be
Yes.
accepted, which is such a lovely part of the sport.
It's absolutely incredible. The nobody cares who you are, where you're from, because there was a great analogy I heard many years ago about Ipanema Beach in Rio in Brazil. And they said it's the great equalizer because you can be a billionaire or you can be broke, but you're in a swimming costume. And I think
Yeah,
that's the same thing with powerlifting. You all have to step on stage in front of an audience in a singlet, and
yeah,
you know, and it doesn't matter who you are, and what you leave that behind as soon as you walk into the competition. And as you
no,
said, it's
exactly.
just about pulling the weight. I wanted to touch on the point that you said it is very much an individual sport, but now has that changed for you a little bit in perspective in terms of your time in the sport and now being the coach, seeing there is quite a team element behind it? So I sort of view it as it's very individual, but with the support of a team and a
Yeah,
community.
so it is one of those things. I think maybe leaning into, especially the equipped side of powerlifting, which is where I tend to compete, is that
Right.
like you look at just the effort it takes just to get people in and out of the kit itself. You need a team of maybe two or three people just
Yep.
for that. So yeah, it
And
is an
a
individual sport.
forklift.
And a forklift. Yeah, you used to see people hanging off bars, off racks.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a running joke with, I think I'm the only equipped, well, proper or full power equipped lifter in the gym.
Yeah.
Getting in and out of a squat suit is usually a bit of a
Yeah.
laughing matter for most. Um, but yeah, it is, and I think no one can achieve their sort of best on their own. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it really does come down to having that team support, where that is, literal as in terms of like coaching, nutrition, psychology, or just having the support from others. Like it's amazing the difference it makes just having supporters in the crowd for an athlete's performance, just having that support from the other side of the platform.
Yes.
So yeah, like you are right. Yes, it is a team sport, but I think the longer I've been in it, the more I've been involved in the coaching side as well. It is clear that yes, you're an individual, but it is still very much like a team as a whole in terms
Yeah.
of sport.
And I think the mental aspect of that, and also being able to compete with your teammates that know you from the gym, that can watch you and say, hang on a sec, that's where you need your team or your coach to say, maybe not such a big jump, maybe a bigger jump. Your mate saying to you, you pulled that like you were still warming up. The mental aspect of your team behind you can be an absolute game changer.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's you see a lot of athletes, they'll come especially to their first internationals. It can go one way or the other, but it's usually the way of like, oh, let's play it safe. The nerves are there. You may not have that kind of perception of where your ability is actually at. So I think that's where, yeah, it does come down to having, like you say, the coaches, the
Hmm.
supporters being sort of saying like, well, no, you have got more. Believe in yourself and like, put that weight on the bar. And I think it's amazing, like especially seeing the level of trust that athletes have in coaches, especially when you have that relationship built there, and instead of saying like, right, you're lifting this, and instead of looking at you like you're crazy, they'll go, okay, I'm doing it, and they'll
Yeah.
go out there and they'll smash it. But if they were on their own, chances are they would have gone far less, played it safe, and sort of cracked on. And I think it's why it is so important to have especially that coaching side of it. And it's something that, I've tried to make sure that we implement as best we can over the last few championships, because it really, really does make a difference on not only athlete performance, but athlete enjoyment as well.
Mm.
They don't have to think about anything else except lifting the weight on the bar, which is what they should be doing, as athletes. There's
Absolutely.
nothing worse than sort of stressing about, oh, am I going to have to be here at this time? What do I need to do here? Like, where am I going to put my attempt cards? What am I going to do next? What if so and so pulls this? What do I need to do then? It's like they don't need to think. They can sit, they
Mm.
can chill, they can get hype, they can do whatever they need to do. But they then have the support from our coaching staff to be able to do their best.
Absolutely. Or as happened to me once at a nationals, I pulled out my earphones, but the silicon tip stayed in the ear. So it was my coach with his tweezers and his sister trying to get it. These are the small
Yeah,
things you don't realize. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's mad. It's like you do all these things, and it's like I think it's one of those ones with as a coach, you're not just there just to write numbers, like you said. You're there as
Yeah.
a I don't know, a bag holder, a
Yeah.
trout holder, a
Headphone
chalk
holder,
holder.
phone
Yeah,
holder, yeah, water bottle holder. Yeah.
yeah. You're basically a walking shelf. I
Sure.
think at the
Yeah.
end of the
Very
competition.
sweaty towel holder. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think also, the coaching side of it comes down to knowing what the athlete needs before they even realize they need it.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's completely true there. I think a lot of athletes, you try and sort of ask them sort of like, what might you want on the day? Like, what kind of
Mm.
lifter are you? Like, are you introverted, extroverted? But I think under the heat of the moment, people do change. People sort of show or like feel things that they may not have felt before, or they may want something that they've never needed before because they are under the spotlight on the biggest platform, competing internationally. So yeah, like it is a coach's job to be able to sort of guess to an
Yes.
extent. It is a little bit of trial and error, but like you said, like know what the athlete actually needs before they know they need it. And that it comes with practice. It's almost, I call it
Mm.
having like a coach's eye. It's not just in terms of like attempt selection and numbers, but like knowing, like looking at an athlete, seeing
Hmm.
like, okay, are they starting to spiral? Are they starting to sort of doubt themselves? It's like getting ahead of that and like not acknowledging the spiral itself, but like immediately starting to like either boost their confidence or just talk about something else. Even if
Yeah.
it's, I've had a coach come to me like in competition and sort of say, they can see I was quite nervous and just say, oh, so what do you do for work? And I was like, what? It's like, yeah, what do you do for work? Like, I don't think we talked about this before. So we started talking about this, and like immediately I calmed down. And so looking
Brilliant.
back on it, it seemed like wizardry at the time, but it's like almost like looking and knowing and sort of using those sort of cues to sort of, right, this person just needs to get out of their own head,
That's yeah.
as is well to hate in a lot of sports.
I like that. You know, coaching is wizardry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think
Absolutely.
because you can do all the scouting and game planning and
Mm.
maths that you want, but like a lot of the time is like it's about best guessing it, and sometimes it can just look like magic, like wizardry, like everything falls together for a plan, and the coach will be sat there like, I didn't plan any of it. It just kind of happened that way. But I'll definitely take the credit. No, I'm
No,
just kidding.
you said, of course,
Um,
obviously it was planned weeks ago.
yeah, no, this has been months and months in the work. We knew exactly this was going to happen. We knew we were going to time out on second. This is all
Yeah,
a
yeah,
ploy to throw people off and like then come
yeah,
out for the win on third. Like it's game plan. But yeah, I think the biggest part of coaching is probably reaction. Like being
yeah.
able to really quickly think in the moment. Things do go wrong. Things do go wrong outside of people's control. Like you never know. Like someone could hurt themselves. Someone could
Mm.
get a bad call. Someone could cut depth for the first time in their life at competition. It's about
Hmm.
reacting and then adjusting the situation and then making the most of that and moving forward and not allowing that to sort of what's the word, sort of make everything sort of crumble around
Yeah.
you. So there's quite a lot of probably pressure and stress on a coach. And I think speaking to a few of the other Commonwealth head coaches, the Commonwealth can be a bit of a trial by fire because it is quite a long championship. It's probably longer
Hmm.
than most international championships with very long days. So if a coach can survive, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, that week, they could probably handle almost any championships from there.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. And sometimes the coaches, more often than not, are also wanting to compete themselves. So it's an
Yes.
incredible sacrifice because you sort of think, where would my numbers be? I don't even think it crosses a coach's mind. Where would my numbers be if I wasn't coaching?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that like the coach's mind, and we regularly have coaches, myself included, that compete and coach, and
Mm.
you kind of have to accept that you're just going to put up what you put up.
Yeah.
We're there. We love competing, and that's why we do it. And there's nothing. Well, you're going all that way. New Zealand last time, like you want to compete, but at the same time, if you're a coach, you're a coach first,
Yeah.
and you put
Absolutely.
the results of your team first, and then you take what you can on the day, and if you do well, great. But chances are you're going to be very, very light coming in. Like
Yeah.
most coaches don't have a lot of time to eat and usually just live off caffeine and sweets, which I'm not complaining about. It's great.
Not
It's a
a.
fun week. It's like being a kid again.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you come to compete. Things probably don't feel amazing, but it's part and parcel.
Yeah.
And you kind of just get through it.
Absolutely. How has coaching changed you personally, from the person you were as an athlete to the person who you are now?
I think I have maybe a better understanding of the sport in itself. Like when I was just an athlete, I think a lot of the times you don't notice the intricacies that
Hmm.
happen in the day. You kind of just you either relying on someone else or going through the very basics. Like the knowledge of the rules were relatively minimal, especially
Hmm.
some of the more obscure ones. Whereas I think as a coach, in terms of my own mindset, it's helped quite a lot in terms of my approach to competing. I mean, it doesn't help the comp anxiety, that's always there. And I think I'll happily admit that after 7 years of competing, I still get just as nervous before a competition as my first. But I think
Yeah.
how you then respond to that throughout the competition then changes. Like once you kind of get your level head back, you can kind of see it as the bigger picture. Sometimes maybe of detriment because you're not
Hmm.
focusing on your own performance. You're now thinking like, right, I've got my coach's hat on, so if so and so does this and so and so does that, what do I need to do? So sometimes it is having that kind of trust to put in the hands of whoever's coaching you at the time that
Yes.
they can also do that. So sometimes it's a little hard to get out of your own head when you are a coach and an athlete. But at the same time, I think, yeah, it gives you sort of a higher level of confidence and a better understanding of the sport.
Right. Absolutely. I just had a small chuckle there because I remembered for myself one competition where I went out. I think it was a nationals, and I squatted to squat for opening squat. Went down, came halfway up and went, that wasn't deep enough. And I went down again, got deeper and came up. And everybody's looking at me like, it's like, oh, wait, I'm thinking like a coach, not like an athlete. You have
Yeah.
to throw that switch in your head.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's one of those ones like and you're right. Like it's while you're lifting as well. You really don't want to be thinking about anything else. You want to be sort of focusing on what you're doing, but you
yeah,
can't help it.
you
And
can't help it.
I've been on a bench and touched the bar on my chest and be like, well, how many team points do we need to get best open men's? I'm like, why on earth am I thinking about this?
Yeah,
Like I should be listening for the press command. Like what on earth's
yeah,
going
yeah.
on? Um, so yeah, like it does lead for an interesting competition. But I think the points where you can switch your mind off, it works very well. But yeah, a lot of the time you're right. You are sort of
Yeah.
thinking from more of a coach's point of view.
Because I think the problem is once you become a coach, you're always a coach, right? It's not something you can sort of go back from in terms of how you think. So-
Yeah, it really does change your mentality.
yeah.
Because yeah, you're like I said before, you're thinking bigger picture like all the time, even if it's not necessarily about yourself. If you coach individuals, if you coach teams, like there's going to
Hmm.
be sort of thoughts on a daily basis on how you can best improve. There might have been like positives, negatives happening, sort of like trying to like analyze those in your head. Like I
Yeah.
don't think you like ever truly switch off, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It
Yeah.
keeps you busy.
Keeps you
And
out of trouble.
yes, yeah. um, but yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, fantastic. So, what I wanted to just also talk about now is, I mean, that's such incredible growth from the Commonwealth in 2017. You said there were 5 athletes to now. How is powerlifting grown where you are, and what is sort of do you think the reason is for it? Because I mean, I remember
So
chatting to some of the New Zealanders, and just their growth has been exceptional. I think they've got over 2,000 affiliated lifters now.
yeah, I think a lot of it is popularity of the sport for one.
Mm.
The Sheffield Powerlifting Championships have played a massive part. As you look at Worlds last year, having record level numbers
Hmm.
following Sheffield, like more people getting exposed to sport. So I think definitely hats off to SBD for that. But from more of a, let's say, local point of view for us, it's being able to grow our committee. So,
Hmm.
so the main volunteer base that run the sport. So not having 3 or 4 people do, I don't know, 8 to 10 roles. So you're
Right.
juggling, you're trying to manage competitions director and social media and volunteers and anti-doping. Whereas I think once we started getting more people on who could focus solely on each role and then look at actually progressing the role, so progressing the standard of our competitions, progressing our
Hmm.
social media outreach. I think the more gyms, we're quite lucky in Cardiff. I think we have 3 or 4 powerlifting gyms or gyms with powerlifting kit in
Okay.
within like one city, which is incredible. Well, I think 2 are within a 5-minute walk of each other as well, which is
Right.
crazy. Um,
Brilliant.
but I think that just helps in terms of the exposure to the sport and like having more and more. I think it's a bit of a snowball effect. Like the more members we get, the more exposure we
Yes.
have on the ground in gyms, the more likely we are to then get more. But yeah, I think the biggest increase has probably been the standard of competitions. We've been so lucky to have such a dedicated committee and like main volunteer base, like continuously growing our competitions and the standards from our live streams
Hmm.
to the setups, to the venues, to really give athletes a reason to want to compete rather than just to get a qualifying total to go to British, to go to
Right.
wherever it might be. Because a lot of athletes may not ever get to the British standards. Like as the qualifying totals move up,
Mm.
it becomes less and less accessible. So we want to be able to give athletes a great experience within Wales, be that our Welsh national championships or just our divisionals, to make them want to come back and want to have that experience again and want to create new friendships and experience that atmosphere and community. And I think in terms of the international team sort of growth, it's been a lot of feedback from the lifters. Like we are quite a small nation, which means that people that do go abroad tend to know each other or will get
Hmm.
to know each other. And then like I said before, you create those friendships, you have those amazing experiences, and then those athletes then talk to other athletes. and they're like, well, I want to experience that because that sounds incredible. And then we have that snowball effect, which is what we've really seen this year. Like after New Zealand, the amount of lifters I had coming over to me saying, how can I be selected for Commonwealth in 2024? So obviously very honest with them. So this is what you need to look at. Obviously it is quite
Mm-mm.
expensive, which is the other thing. So
Yeah.
start saving now. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, then yeah, we've had an amazing amount of interest. I think because obviously we can only take so many lifters per age class. In
Hmm.
the open men, we had almost triple the number of lifters that we could feasibly take, put their names forward. So even though we're only taking 45, there's probably a good 20 odd lifters that unfortunately didn't get spaces.
Right.
Which is probably even better to see. Like a lot of the times we don't fill up weight classes. We take
Mm.
4 out of 8 or 5 out of 9 for juniors. We've now got full teams basically across the board, men and women, open and junior for the first time ever. So yeah, the growth has been amazing. It's something that I'm incredibly proud of in terms of being Welsh and seeing that growth. But also hopefully it continues forward as well, and we don't sort of stall and go back. But I
Yeah.
think, and I kind of alluded to before, it's that financial aspect that tends to stop a lot of people. I know a lot more people were interested, but you're looking at £800 for flights, 800 or so pounds for hotel, entry
Yes.
fees, anti-doping fees, insurance, transfers. Like a lot of people just aren't in the financial position to be able to feasibly afford it.
Mm.
Like I mean, one or two have been lucky enough to get some individual sponsorship, which is incredibly rare, but also incredibly amazing to see actually happen. And then others look at fundraising, but there's only so far that some people can feasibly get with that. So I think if we want to sort of maybe change the topic a little bit, if we want to
Mm.
see more growth within the sport, I think more like companies and funding bodies getting involved with the sport to enable athletes to travel and compete is probably going to be the sort of best step forward. Because if you can take away that financial barrier, then
Yeah.
we could see huge teams going.
So it's such an important point, and that was really one of the primary reasons we started this podcast, because we wanted to find a way to give the sport and the athletes exposure. So even with this video, we cut it into shorts, we post it, and we get it out onto our platforms. It gets shared. We're wanting to bring in as much exposure as possible for the athletes and for the sport itself, for the coaches. So if you were speaking to the companies that could be potential sponsors, what is it that's so special about powerlifting? I think just the quality of the people that are involved is unbelievable. They are selfless, they are giving, they are committed, they are hardworking. Why should people or corporates look at sponsoring powerlifting?
I think there's probably a couple of maybe different viewpoints here that all kind of link together. Like the first one being, as you've alluded to, is people are very committed and passionate about the sport
Mm.
without funding. We take nothing for granted. Um, we work as hard as we can to get where we go. So I think we, in terms of the level of appreciation and what we can actually do
Hmm.
with the smallest amount of funding, would have probably the biggest impact. Whereas a lot of sports who rely on funding generally, who then look for further funding, funding in itself probably doesn't have the biggest impact. Whereas for a sport that receives next to none, the
Yeah.
smallest input can have the biggest impact. We're also very much a grassroots level sport as well. So in terms of getting people into the sport, not just at a young age but at all ages,
Hmm.
it's a sport where literally anyone can start at any point and be
But
able to
that's
compete
such a
and
valid
progress.
point as well, because I mean that for sponsors, potential sponsors, that broadens their base of potential customers due to the sponsorship to everybody.
Yes, exactly. It's not just one population. It's not
Mm.
just 18 to 30-year-olds, because after 30 you're sort of seen as, right, you've reached your quote unquote physical prime within the
Yeah.
sport. Risk of injury goes up. Whereas we still have lifters. We have a lifter going who's over 70 who's still competing. So you do literally have all ends of the spectrum in terms of age, in terms of background, in terms of that kind of level of diversity as
Hmm.
well. Like if sponsors can quite literally reach any point of any market they want. There's also given that everyone has different backgrounds as well.
Yeah.
People are coming in from backgrounds in like law, for example, marketing. They all have their own specialties, their own jobs, because we're not we can't be full-time athletes because there's no funding involved. So um, you have got that kind of that depth of like the pool to dip into if you did want to look at doing things like that. I think the other thing is as well is quite a new sport. You're essentially
Mhm.
helping promote the growth of an up and coming sport, which can look very very good on companies. Rather than sponsoring sort of the standard sports that a lot of companies go into. Like look into the more specialist sports that are growing
Mm.
and are growing at an incredible rate. We look at the participation at the top level, but also at the lower level, like every single level of competition is growing. So however you want to look at it, whether you want to support the
Yeah.
international lifters, whether you want to support national series, whether you want to support that kind of entry grassroots level, there's opportunity there, and there's a great level of growth. And because we don't currently have, for the majority of the sport, like main level sponsors aside from, let's say, SBD, Alico, obviously do
Hmm.
incredible things for the sport as itself. But in terms of like the home nations, for example, and like the international teams, there is quite a big avenue there. Because you won't be competing with a lot of other sponsors. Like, yes, okay, we have primary sponsors who sponsor British powerlifting, for example.
Hmm.
But in terms of Welsh powerlifting, obviously we do get a great deal of benefit from them. I just want to give a massive shout out actually to SBD, who for the first time have created a Home Nations kit for all the Home Nations, which our feedback from our athletes has been absolutely incredible. And for myself as well, who've been involved competing for Wales for many, many years, and have wanted this for many, many years.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
amazing to see the Welsh Dragon on an SBD singlet. So yeah, huge shout out there to SBD for organising that for us, and I'm sure that'll be
Absolutely. That's
echoed
incredible.
throughout the rest of the Welsh team. But yeah, sorry, kind of got a bit of a ramble there, but
No, no. I
yeah,
think that's a vital point because it's really that's why we're doing this. And I think, I don't think there could be a better brand, and nothing against other sports, but I know powerlifting because of my involvement in it. My background in sports is martial arts and powerlifting, and I started powerlifting because I couldn't get out of bed in the morning anymore, and from all the injuries, tearing my left transverse lateral ligament, that was like the end of it for me.
mm,
And that was in my 40s. So yeah, the as a brand ambassador, a powerlifter, I think would be absolutely wonderful, and it's something that we do need to stress and to get out there. And it's such you've really shared some fantastic insights.
yeah, thank you. And I think it's one of those ones with that kind of investment and sponsorship. Like, that's not to say that there is none. Like, we
Yeah,
are far, far further ahead than we were, let's say, 10 years ago. Like
absolutely.
again, the input from companies within powerlifting, like SBD and
Mm,
Lico, has been
mm,
huge. But I think it's looking at like where we can go moving forward
mm.
in terms of say fully funding teams, like having teams completely paid for, which would be a massive, massive sum of money.
Yes.
Um, or even
Well,
just, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna or a Premier League footballer's 1 week salary.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
know,
that's what's crazy. It's like,
relatively speaking. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that would probably fund powerlifting for years, I think,
yep.
which is, yeah, to go from like none to
That,
that much. And obviously, I'm very much talking about from an individual athlete's point of view.
yeah.
Like, if there are some athletes getting individual sponsorships, which is again amazing to see, but they definitely are very few and far between in terms of the 6,000 plus members we have within Britain
Right.
versus, I don't know, probably the very, I can't probably couldn't put an exact number, but the very very small amount that have
Mm,
individual like fully paid sponsorships. And again, I can understand it comes from, okay, so what's the athlete going to bring back for us? If we're going to give them money, we need
mm,
a return. We need high performing athletes. We need this and that, which is more than fair enough. Um, the thing is, then it's looking at the home nations teams. Like, we have very high performing athletes on the Commonwealth platform every year,
yeah.
so there is opportunity there for those that may not compete for Great Britain as often, but we compete for Wales and we do very well
Hmm.
there.
Yes.
Um, so there is still opportunity, if companies wanted to get involved.
And I think it's unlike unlike professional sports, where there's a specific tier that you really want to go after. Within powerlifting, because of your club, your regional, your national, and then international levels, all of those tiers available for sponsorship. And you can sponsor an athlete that performs really well at club level or provincial, regional level. It doesn't have to be that massive cost of international level. So there are these opportunities for sort of smaller sponsors to get involved.
No, 100%. I think
Mm,
it's something that we started to see maybe a little bit more of this year. So we've
mm,
actually started advertising for like some competition sponsorship, for example, and we have had a few come through and say, because it's obviously
brilliant.
much, like you said, much smaller
Mm,
sums of money. Um, so hopefully we see that progress. And I
yeah,
think any kind of input from sponsors is going to be growth, and the more growth we
yeah,
have, the more exposure we get, and people like yourself doing such incredible work, giving the sport the exposure it deserves, then hopefully, as the spotlight starts to move over onto the sport itself, then we do start to see more companies wanting to get involved because it is different. It's not the standards. We are a very appreciative sport because we
yes,
don't get
absolutely.
we get very little to anything.
Yeah,
Whereas I think a lot of bigger team sports just expect sponsorships. They are expectant on it each year. Whereas if we get, even if it's £50, we're going to be
yeah,
insanely grateful because we will make the absolute most of that money to help grow our sport. This is when I'm talking to potential, sponsors and investors. Like, imagine what we could do with 500. Imagine what we could do with 5,000. Like, if
yeah,
you're looking even more than that, I think we'd probably go weak at the knees with all the things that we could probably do with it in terms of
yes,
like the literal growth of the sport. So it's great to see more people getting involved, and I think for me, I'm quite excited to hopefully see that continue to move forward because the more I think, and again, it does all come down to financial input. But the more
yeah,
financial input we can get into the sport, the more you can then see returns within the sport itself. Like we're very reliant on. I've said this before, like volunteer bases. Very few
yes,
people are paid, even at the top level, like
mm,
within British powerlifting. Like the CEO is an unpaid role. It's a 40-hour-a-week minimum job with an
yeah,
insane amount of stress. And if nobody does it, the sport can't move forward. Like having been in that role myself for 8 to 10 months, I can definitely speak for how difficult it is. And like hats off to my predecessor and James who took it on from me because
mm,
it's not easy. It's quite a thankless role. And yeah, it's the same at all the levels. Like you have Wales, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. We all have CEOs, we all have chairmen, we all have finance directors that work for free
yeah,
to continue to grow the sport. Um, and the progress we've been able to make with people working for free is incredible. Like I think what we could do if people actually had those as their paid jobs, like in
right,
terms of the growth of the sport from that aspect as well. Like not just the athletes, but the officials, the committees, the executives. Like if there was any sort of money there and they really could make that their full-time job, again, the amount more growth we'd see, but also the amount more growth we'd be expecting to see because they'd
yes,
be then held to their salary, would be amazing. And it's what you see in most professional sports now.
yeah,
Even like British weightlifting, for example, like a lot of their senior executives are paid. You look at the same with, I'm trying to think of another example, but yeah, all the major sports, like
mm,
let's say, any of them involved in Olympic or Paralympic cycles will have paid roles running them because it is such a big job. So
yeah,
again, another potential avenue there, but yeah, again, slight tangent.
yeah. No, I think it's that's actually something I'd love to be able to have a chat with you about. Maybe even your predecessor or one or two other CEOs that are involved, just in terms of what's actually involved in the role. Because you so rightly said, people don't know. People don't understand what goes on behind the scenes, the sacrifice, the work, the commitment. And I think if those could be paid positions, as they should be, it's not about I'm now getting paid for my time. Yes, that's a nice bonus, but it frees you up from having to do other sources of income to put a roof over your head and feed your family, where you can now
Mm.
focus on the role for in its entirety. So that's something I would love to have the opportunity to do. Maybe we can schedule that as a separate episode.
Oh, definitely. And
Important.
like I know that the gentleman that took over after me, I'm sure he'd be more than happy
Mm,
to jump on and speak about it, and could definitely reach out to my predecessor as well
yeah.
and see if he'd want to speak about it. because it is a big role, and I think they do it very well, but it's the sense you're working 40 hours a week plus whatever job you're already doing, which
Yep.
could be another 40 hours a week, which kind of almost becomes a bit debilitating after a
Yes.
while. For people to stay in it. So I maybe sort of talk about Richard, who was my predecessor, who's also the Commonwealth president. So I'm
Hmm.
sure you'll meet him in some city.
Yes.
Who's in that role for many many years. So to be able to stay in that role for that amount of time is more than commendable. Because it is hard. And like, okay, you do a lot of good, and you
I was
do
going
see
to
the
say
positive
it's
coming back of it.
lunacy.
Yeah. And when you do see good things happen, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Seeing like hard work come to fruition, seeing the teams of people you put in place, getting the job done, moving the federation forward. But like I said, it is difficult, as would be expected with a CEO role. But
Yeah.
most CEOs are paid a lot
A
rather
lot.
than
Very
nothing.
well. Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, if you don't have to mention any specific names, but with the athletes that you've worked with, how have you seen powerlifting change their lives? I know we mentioned mental health a little bit earlier and other aspects. Are there any stories that you could share about that, about how special the sport is?
Yeah, so I think I've got quite a few stories in terms of mental health, but I think,
Mhm.
and I'll probably go into a couple of examples, but also physical health. So
Yes.
taking on athletes who are, let's say, in a position where they are maybe older, lacking the ability to sort of move around unassisted, even if it's just sort of like sitting up and down. So not initially looking at getting them into the sport itself, but just sort of taking them through sort of basic strength training to start,
Hmm.
to give them that quality of life. I've then seen quite a few of them want to continue to push that kind of strength training, and then moving on to using equipment like barbells. And that's when I then might have that conversation and say, look, there is actually a sport where you can, lift heavy barbells, 3 times on each, and then can also travel the world if you get to a high enough level.
Mm.
And given the especially some towards the later masters classes like Masters 3, Masters 4, not always as many people within, especially within Great Britain, that go for the teams. Like there are vacancies there. If you get to a
Hmm.
point where you're competitive enough, that is a goal that is definitely achievable.
Absolutely.
So I've got quite a few examples of just increasing the quality of life of people, but that doesn't always apply to people who are older. I've had, unfortunately, a few people who are younger that have come in having had accidents,
Hmm.
injuries, maybe some imbalances, be that from a lack of use, a sedentary lifestyle, or like I said, from an unfortunate incident, and just using again strength training to get them to a point where they can live, let's say, normally, but
Yes.
then also using that to push it further, and then giving them a point where they can, okay, now I'm a lot stronger than I was, and actually I'm competing.
Yeah.
For someone that maybe could struggle to walk unassisted, you're now squatting 100 kilos, which is incredible. So yeah, from a physical point of view, it's an amazing sport if implemented correctly. But then, like I've said before, from a mental health point of view, a lot of people do come into the sport, come into the gym looking for an outlet, maybe even looking, not even knowing for a community, for some, for
Yes.
people that they can train with, people that can be around, people who are like-minded. It's incredible for a sport where people are such individuals to share such common um, interests outside the sport, be that music, again, a lot of us into sort of like the heavy metal side of music, be that gaming, be that
Hmm.
food. I think again we've alluded to food being a big one. Like powerlifters love their food. Um, just almost having like quite an instant connection with people within the sport. So just having that level of community, but then also like the positive benefits that strength training can have on
Hmm.
mental health, and like how the body responds to strength training, like increases in serotonin, increases in sort of like that positive level of mood, um, and also being able to see progress, being able to see that kind of
Hmm.
like positive steps forward. So for people who like may not have the best outlook on life outside of the gym, or have like the best like life in itself outside of the gym, it gives them a place where they're in control, and they can progress and they can see themselves moving forward and developing and getting better, and hopefully, increasing their kind of outlook on life itself. Therapy can be incredibly expensive. Like
Yeah.
psychiatrists cost hundreds of pounds an hour. Waiting lists can be 3, 4 years long within the NHS just because of the strain that's put on it, because so many people are suffering, especially coming out the other side of
Hmm.
COVID.
Yes.
So, like, giving people a place where they can train, they can be part of a community, and where they can hopefully improve their outlook, at least from a mental point of view, from a psychological point of view on life. It's priceless, really. And I think that that's where maybe it is unfortunate, but it's where we're also seeing a lot of growth. I guess it is positive at the same time, because people do come in, they do feel better about themselves, but I think it's where they're coming from is maybe more
Hmm.
the unfortunate side of it. But I'm happy to be part of a sport that does help people. And it's not down to like one individual helping them. The sport itself and like
Hmm.
the training methods, the community. Um, yeah, just giving that kind of level of positivity.
I think it's the. I don't think powerlifting has ever been more needed than right now. As
Mm,
you were saying, where you're seeing people coming out of COVID, the mental health issues, the financial stress that people have been under, the everything that's happening in the world, it becomes a very safe place, and it's a very, very beneficial form of therapy and cost effective. It's physical, not just mental. Where, so you said, waiting 4 years to see a psychiatrist, it can be incredibly destructive. But getting into a gym, and I mean, I can imagine, and I've seen it, not being able to walk properly. We've had certain elder athletes that have struggled to walk, and as you said, when they step on the platform for the first time and they start lifting their weights. We have a famous athlete in South Africa, Dan Oppenheim, and he's becoming Master 5 now. And
gosh.
he's been lifting for decades, and it's to watch him lift the weights he does is incredible. And then you have to help him onto the podium, but it's because his body's like, what the heck? It's the most wonderful sport. I'd
I
love
think,
to know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just to add on that, I think it's probably
Mm.
one of the very, very few sports I've ever been involved in when I've seen people who are over the age of 80 still actively competing at a competitive level.
Yeah,
And you'd think that, putting a heavy weight on your back would not be the sport where you see that. But
yeah.
because, like I said, you do have that level of control, and if you've been taught proper technique, then
Mm.
there's no reason why you can't keep doing that,
That's
at
it.
the age of
Yeah.
80, at the age of 90.
Yeah. Bone density, muscle density, your nervous system, all of these things relate directly to your quality of life. If you can move around, you can connect with people. It's actually vital. And I think in the boom, as we're seeing the boomer generation retiring, that we need tens of thousands more. My role is a couple of things, but I want to make sure that the Commonwealth champs within next two competitions is over 25 days. Because
Mm.
there's so many athletes represented and from so many nations. I'd love to be able to see that. Well, okay, not Commonwealth, maybe let's say a world champs, because Commonwealth is limited. But yeah, start to get a few
Well, I think
more, double the team
the
numbers.
the previous championships, before the Worlds last year, was
Yeah.
the biggest IPF championships by numbers I think they've ever held.
Yes.
There's like just late 400s with just over 500 nominated. I think Worlds last year just overtook that.
Yep.
Um, but it is incredible to see the growth. I mean, hats off to the New Zealand Powerlifting Federation for somehow managing to manage that, insane number of
Yeah.
unexpected
Absolutely.
entries. They did an incredible job. But yeah,
Uh,
like, yeah, well, maybe not for the meet organizers, but yeah, long may that continue.
yeah. Absolutely. No, no. For the meet organizers, they enjoy it. If you don't love that, then you're not going to work. It's going to be crazy. The one thing I know with this year, I think we're having well over 1,000. I think it's 1,300 athletes so far. I think close off is tomorrow. Cut off's tomorrow. So we'll
Yeah, so
know sort
tomorrow
of
at
the
midnight, I
final.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll know the final numbers. It's gonna be massive. So just we're running a little bit short on time. You tell us a little bit about your team. Anyone special that you want to mention? Any shout outs? I allocated. I've got 3 interviews today, so we're really trying to get the numbers in before the championship. So I know we could actually chat for a few hours. So I'm looking forward to our
Yeah.
next conversation. But if I was, I mean, if I stopped interrupting you, it would be a lot shorter. But tell us
No,
about the
you're all
team.
good.
Yeah.
Tim, I, what I don't want to do is give away too much. That we have got some lifters that can potentially cause some upsets. Like
Excellent.
we're not gonna
Good.
name names and make the other
Yeah.
coaches' lives easier.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we've got such a massive range of lifters. I don't think it would be fair to give any individual lifter a shout out. We have a few returning lifters from previous Commonwealth Championships, which is amazing to see. So we have like veterans as such, but then we also have a lot of people doing their first. So I think for them, I just say, best of luck for myself and enjoy it. I think
Excellent.
probably the only probably like shout outs I'd probably give would be to the coaching staff and the committee in terms
Mhm.
of the work going on behind the scenes to get this all sorted, and also to the organisers of the championships, because, like you said, it's going to be a massive championships of combined people. So,
Yeah.
hats off to everyone involved in this massive undertaking. I think we're all very much looking forward to coming to Sun City and sort of experiencing the championship. And I think, from the final point for Team Wales, I think we may end up causing a few upsets. I can,
Excellent.
apologies in advance, even though I'm not sorry.
Love
Um,
it. Yeah.
but I think,
Absolutely
it's,
brilliant.
it'll be a great championship.
Oh, good. And last year we had World Bench, and then I think World Masters the year before that. They were both over June, May time of year. And the Valley of Waves, which is the famous sort of pool water park that's there, is going to be open. So bring your costumes.
Amazing.
It's going
Oh,
to
I
be.
will
They've
be.
got a monster slide. They've got a fantastic wave pool. So it's going to be an absolute blast there. So really, it's going to be fun. And Tom, we're looking forward to meeting you in person as well.
Oh, likewise.
So we're really grateful for your time. Best of luck to you and the team, and have a safe trip out. And we'll see you at Sun City. Also, if there's anyone that you feel we should talk to, would you let me know? You can direct message me rather than calling them out here.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll drop you a message afterwards.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Tom. I'm just going to end the recording and then I'll say goodbye.
Okay, no worries.